Hey everyone, as promised, here's a simple starter guide to the Wilds hunting horn based on the first PC beta test. Since it is only based on the beta test, there are many things that are incomplete and could still be changed in the full release, not to mention the limited footage obtained within the time constraints. That is why this will not be a detailed guide, but instead a simpler guide, just enough to help you get started when the full game releases next year. I will try to make a more detailed version after the actual release if I can. In this video I want to focus more on the new moves and changes to the hunting horn. For existing moves that are either similar or same as the Iceborne hunting horn, I will only go through them briefly so that we can save some time, since most of you probably know these existing moves. If you do want more details on these existing moves, you can check my Iceborne guide, but it's optional and not required to understand this video. Here's a quick look at the chapters covered in this video. And here's a table of equivalent keys based on your preferred controls. Keep in mind that the keys are based on the beta test and could potentially be different later. Firstly, we will look at the basic attacks, and these are mostly the same as World and Iceborne. On the top right we can see that there are white, red and yellow notes which we will call Note 1, Note 2 and Note 3. The colors will be different for other horns because I saw this in the beta. If you use a controller, the notes will show your inputs instead of mouse icons. Using these attacks will then leave their corresponding note in the musical staff on the top left here, and when the notes match any melody in your horn, you will stock a melody here which can be played for its effects. Note 1 still gives you the left swing. Note 2 still gives you the right swing. It still has more speed and damage than the left swing. Note 3 gives you the backward strike, and you can turn around and hit behind you too, but your character turn speed is a little slower in Wilds. Direction plus Note 1 gives you forward smash, now having less damage than right swing, which means all Note 1 attacks essentially have lower damage now. Direction plus Note 2 gives you the flourish, swinging twice while adding a single Note 2. As usual, you can add another note during the second swing. You can also roll to cancel the second swing just as before. Direction plus Note 3 still gives you the overhead smash. This move has a new feature now, which allows you to now add another note during the second hit of this move, giving you some new shortcut options. Forward plus Note 3 again after overhead smash will give you a completely new move simply known as the overhead smash follow-up attack, dealing high damage. It has the same animation as Crush from Rise, but you can only do it after an overhead smash, and only with Note 3. The direction cannot be changed unless you use focus mode, and this can be used as a wake-up attack on sleeping monsters if you wish to. After any basic attack, backwards plus any note still gives you the hilt stab as a shortcut to add notes quickly. When your weapon is sheathed, Note 1 without direction still allows you to ready your weapon without attacking or adding any notes. For your draw attack, you can use forward Note 1 to get a forward smash as usual. But in Wilds, you can cancel the forward smash into a right swing with Note 2, or backward strike with Note 3. As mentioned, basic attacks remain largely the same as it used to be except for the few changes mentioned. Next we will talk about performances and encores, and the new performance beat. When melodies are stocked, you can perform them to apply the melody's effects. For melodies that apply buffs to you and your teammates, there will still be two levels. Level 1 being yellow, and level 2 being purple. Playing it once gives level 1, and playing it again gives level 2. After using Perform, you can use Encore to instantly replay the melody. You can also see the melodies highlighted in yellow during a performance, and purple during an encore. New to Wilds, we will get a short timer to warn us that a melody will expire soon. The mechanics of applying buffs are basically the same as World and Iceborne, except that performances apply their effects much faster now. You can no longer perform a performance cancel by dodging immediately after swinging though, you must wait for the melody to apply, but with the faster performance speed, it's a give and take. Encores also have much faster swings and apply melody effects immediately during the final swing without waiting for a performance duration. The new Encore only has one attack style, which is a quick double swing from the right, and there's only 2 variations. No direction gives you the stationary Encore, and forward direction makes you jump forward. Traditional directional encores such as sideways and backwards encores are no longer a thing in Wilds. Directional performances are still available though. The forward performance is now faster and is actually useful in Wilds, unlike in World where the forward performance is slow and terrible unless used after forward slamming attacks. You can of course still use the forward performance after forward slamming attacks for a quick kick-up performance, but even on its own it's actually useful now. Many other moves also combo into forward performance quickly and smoothly. Neutral performance is still useful, but due to the new shockwave hitbox, and the speed of the new forward performance combos, it seems that forward could be better in many situations. You can still use neutral performance as a draw attack if your weapon is sheathed. The sideways and backwards perform still exist, but still not as useful as the others in general. Neutral performance after a hilt stab still gives you the quick performance, which is even faster in Wilds. Another new feature is after swinging the horn backwards with neutral perform, you can also press forward to point the horn forward mid-performance. Pointing forward will actually slow down your performance slightly, but will make it easier to land your shockwaves in front of you. Speaking of shockwaves, aside from the initial shockwave that accompanies the performance swing, every melody will also deal 1 hit of shockwave after being played, regardless of what type of melody it is. The echo wave melody will deal much more damage though, since echo waves are damage-dealing melodies instead of buffs. In the beta we get the blunt echo waves that can build up stun, but in the full game we are likely getting other damage types like cutting and elements. Echo waves are now made up of normal notes because the echo attack aka spin to win is completely gone in Wilds. As for the sonic waves melody, I have tested it and can confirm that it still works on monsters that burrow into the sand, forcing them out of the sand. Self-improvement is still as important as ever. Level 1 gives you movement speed with your weapon drawn, and Level 2 provides a good self-attack boost and prevents your attacks from being deflected. You can still stock up to 3 melodies, and you can still choose which melody to start with by following the inputs shown here. While performing with multiple stored melodies, you can still choose to do nothing and let it continue playing from one melody to the next without attacking, and using Encore at the end will deal 1 hit of shockwave for every melody included in the Encore. Multiple echo waves still get their hits combined though. You can still roll to end the performance before it plays the next melody. However, in Wilds we have a new attack called the performance beat. Pressing the perform button again before moving to the next melody will have your hunter use the performance beat, which is a swing that deals damage while moving from one melody to the next, which can happen twice if you swing from melody 1 to 2, and then again from melody 2 to 3. At the end of all 3, you can use Encore as usual. Performance beat is optional since adding this attack does make you cycle to the next melody slightly slower in exchange for that extra damage, so you can choose to use no performance beat at all, just one, or both times before you Encore. The performance beat can be used with a forward, left, or right direction to move your hunter while swinging, and the Encore only has a stationary or forward version as mentioned before. You can also use focus mode while performing to adjust your aim. The performance beat also has a hidden perfect timing mechanic, where if you use it immediately when the previous melody's effects are applied, you will get a quicker and higher damage swing with a distinct sound and red glow. This timing also applies to Encores. You can compare the damage and timing of the perfect versus non-perfect versions. If you only want to Encore 1 or 2 melodies instead of cycling through all your melodies, keep in mind that this is the new Encore input to skip directly to an Encore. The perform input will always give you the performance beat and move to the next melody instead of using an encore, unless you only have one melody, or have already cycled through all melodies, then both inputs will give you the encore. Next is the special performance, offset melody. In Wilds, we get a new move called the special performance, which will apparently be different based on which horn is used. But in the demo, the special performance we have on this horn is the offset melody, which will allow us to perform an offset counter on monster attacks. The special performance seems to be the only melody with 4 notes, while all others are made of 3 notes. When stored, the special performance has its own storage that is separated from the other melodies, and will not overwrite other melodies or get overwritten by other melodies. It will be available until you use it, but you can only store one at a time. The special performance has its own special effect and does not perform like other regular melodies. In the case of the offset melody, using it will have the hunter perform a backstep dodge into an offset attack, and using it does not delete the notes from your staff. While it requires 3 inputs to activate, you can hold down only the perform button to hold the stance for about 5 seconds before letting go to perform the attack. The backstep dodge has iframes, while the forward swing will perform an offset if successfully timed against monster attacks that connect with you using their body parts. If the swing does not trigger an offset, it still provides hyper armor during the swing. The swing also deals good damage on its own, but I would recommend using it as a counter instead of just for random damage because it's a slow attack, and requires you to store a new offset melody if you intend to counter subsequent attacks. Unlike some other weapons, Hunting Horn does not get a special follow-up after successful offsets. You also need to make sure your weapon is drawn if you want to counter, or else you will only use a regular perform to draw your weapon. You can chain a regular performance directly into an offset melody stance to counter incoming attacks. As seen here, you can cancel the performance halfway through without spending the melody. After the offset you can chain back into a performance should the need arise. Next we'll look at the Echo Bubbles. This is reworked from Iceborne and behaves like a totally new move in Wilds. You can set up Echo Bubbles that provide beneficial buffs to those who stay inside. The buff now only stays active if you are within a certain radius of the bubble, and will not stay active after you moved too far from it. The effects are likely going to be different for different horns in the full game, most likely differentiated by different bubble colors. Setting up the bubble will deal 1 hit of damage when the bubble appears, and the bubble lasts for 1 minute. The 3 icons here represent the number of bubbles you have available at the moment, and will be used up for each bubble you place. They take 30 seconds to recharge, but keep in mind that the 3 bubbles do not recharge independently after being used, they actually recharge one after another, meaning if you use all 3 bubbles at once, the second bubble must wait for the first bubble to be recharged before starting its own 30-second timer, so it can add up to 90 seconds of cooldown if all 3 are empty. You can only have 3 bubbles active at a time. If you place a 4th one, the oldest one will disappear. Aside from providing buffs, the bubbles also triggers a shockwave every time you swing your horn or perform melodies, including the offset melody. These shockwaves will deal damage to monsters that are inside the bubble's radius, and the damage from all 3 bubbles can stack and hit the same monster if it touches all 3 bubbles, so keeping monsters in your bubbles will boost your damage output. You don't even need to be inside the bubble to trigger these shockwaves. More importantly, while setting up the bubble, you can also add up to 3 notes of your choice during the dancing animation, which is perfect since most melodies have 3 notes. This is a fast way to store new melodies while setting up bubbles. The timing for hitting these notes do not seem to matter as long as they fit within the dance. You can set up a bubble and immediately combo into a kick-up with forward performance. You can also quickly enter an offset stance right after placing a bubble. Last but not least, new to every weapon in Wilds is the Focus Strike, and for Hunting Horn, our Focus Strike is called Reverb. The initial hit only does damage and chains into nothing if you do not hit a wound. This is meant to be used on wounds that are either created from our attacks, or temporary wounds created through specific monster attacks. During the focus strike, you can add up to 5 notes of your choice, and if you manage to add all 5 notes with the correct timing and tempo, you will get an extra final hit that deals a lot of damage. The correct timing requires you to start adding notes after the character enters the guitar pose and starts strumming, and has a consistent tempo for all 5 notes, performing a strum with each note that deals damage, and then jumping for one final strum if you succeed with your timing. You can pay attention to the visual indicator too, where a red light enters your horn from the left. If you hit the note as the light enters, your horn will glow to indicate the correct timing. Failed timings or missing notes will have a much weaker glow and deal no damage. If you did not add enough notes or failed the timing of just one note, you will get an imperfect attack without the powerful final hit. You can quickly kick up with a forward perform after this move as well. From my testing, you get hyper armor during the animation of this attack. I also managed to deal damage to multiple monsters at once using this move. You cannot use reverb in the middle of a performance. Now let's look at your riding and aerial options. You can swing to attack and add notes while on the sacred. Simply use note 1 to ready your weapon and then you can start your first swing with any note of your choice. With your weapon ready, you can also use perform and encore while riding. Use the sacred auto move button to move while performing. You can jump off with a slow dismount attack, which is note 3 by default, but you can input other notes to change it. This attack does not seem to build up mounting after many attempts from my testing. You can use a regular dismount by jumping off, and then use note 1 to initiate a jumping smash, which can mount monsters. You can add a note 2 or note 3 input to change the note before the attack is completed. The mid-air performance is still there, but I usually pretend like it doesn't exist. The sliding attack remains the same, triggered by using note 1 while sliding, but this time you can add a note 2 or note 3 input to change the note before the attack is completed as well. Anyway, here's a short summary to finish up the video. The combat flow revolves around placing bubbles, and mainly dealing damage with performances and encores, using the focus strike on wounds and openings, and using offset melody as an optional counter-attack. Now that echo attacks are no longer a thing, Hunting Horn is back to prioritizing performances, performance beats and encores for dealing damage. This makes it much more important to frequently store new melodies for damage dealing purposes. However, I would still recommend you to prioritize choosing the right attack for the right opening, rather than being obsessed with choosing attacks based on the notes needed to store melodies all the time. Prioritize storing melodies only when the opening and timing is right, not to mention we have some new moves that allow us to quickly add notes like the bubble dance and focus strike, which will make storing melodies much easier. Needless to say, being able to keep monsters inside the bubbles for maximum damage will be a good bonus, plus we get some beneficial buffs standing inside them too, but don't get too worked up about it if things do not go as planned, because the bubble is just bonus damage. Your main damage source still comes from your weapon. Anyway, that will be the end of this guide. Thank you for your time, and thanks for watching.